So here's a quick review of So You've Been Eaten, a super asymmetrical game for 2 people, all set in this wacky sci-fi universe within 30 minutes. One dude is gonna play as the miner, trying to get 8 crystals to win the game. And this is all within a huge space beast he's been eaten by. To get the crystals, he's using these 3 action dice he rolls every turn, doing stuff from capturing those crystals, pushing away harmful bacteria, killing bacteria, or capturing gear. Of course, the other player is going to be this big fat beast who is currently struggling from a tummy ache because of the miner and wants to get that miner out of its system. For the beast to win, he wants to kill the greedy miner inside of him by advancing one of the 4 bacteria all the way to its highest level. Or he can get enough immune responses, which are viable passive cards, and once he has 5 of those, he wins. The ability to do all these things comes from his hand of 7 stomach cards, which he'll be putting on the board. That's all you need to know for now. Now on to the review, and this game just throws you into its bright, colorful sci-fi world with all of its components. And even when opening the box, there's gonna be art inside the cover. Pretty cool. There's bright colors all over the 3D pieces, areas plastered around the board telling you where to put the decks of cards, and the board is actually 3D too. The middle of the board is this lowered area to move the digestion cards around. There's slots for the bacteria, and all of the miner's tiles and dice fit nicely into its board. When learning, the jokes of this game's name continue with the cute rulebook. The table of contents has the so blah 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 style, and then there's little text bubbles that have quick jokes thrown in, like how your miner's profits are shared for executive level staff. So he's basically risking his life by getting eaten by a beast to meet the company's financial quotas. So now we get to gameplay, and of course we gotta stress the asymmetry between the miner and the beast. It's really pronounced, with the miner using these action dice to remove things from the track, and then the beast is filling that track with cards from their hand. This idea gets even more nuanced when you really dive deep with each side. The miner uses dice for its 3 actions, and then the actions target a card a distance away to the miner equal to that number. So if you use a 5 result, you can capture that lovely crystal 5 spaces away. But hey, sometimes you won't get a die result that corresponds to what you need. Don't worry, not only can you just consume it to change another die's number, but there's also plenty of ways to change around the stomach ordering to your advantage. Of course, there's the stun to just blast back and push back cards. But since the tract always moves forward to fill in gaps, when you eliminate to delete bacteria or capture crystals, that's going to change the ordering a bit. The miner can also upgrade each and every one of its actions to make it way stronger. This can basically give him another action as he can stun bacteria, then reroll that die to do another action. Or he can upgrade to capture gear, which is kinda creepy actually because it's from previously killed miners floating around. Creepiness aside, these one-time use gear have some bonkers fun stuff, like magnets to move things closer to you, or even a teleporter to swap any 2 cards. As for the irritable beasts, they don't have any dice at all, rather their decisions come from their hand of stomach cards. And they want their stomach on the board to be lined with the correct bacteria, because at the end of every miner's turn, the bacteria closest to him attacks. It basically multiplies, meaning that color is one step closer to victory to melt away that annoying miner. This bacteria victory is going to give the beast so many fun decisions on how to replenish the tract every turn. But then there's other things to worry about, like these crystal cards that the miner desperately needs to capture to win the game. So just don't put them down on the tract, right? Well, the reason why you might actually want to put them down is to get all these cool immune response cards. To buy these, the beast just grabs one of them after lining the tract. These typically grant you new abilities for your upcoming turns, like giving you ways to adjust stomach cards. Or you can put tension on the miner by making one color of bacteria much easier to win by. And remember, when you buy 5 of these cards, you win the game, so make sure to just keep buying them. So when zoomed out, the miner is playing this space action adventure fueled by greed, and then the beast is playing this detailed planning card game in order to sequence that miner's adventure. Both sides will have no shortage of what to think about with their eyes glued to this digestive tract. The miner is constantly thinking about shifting cards around for the correct sequencing to protect himself from a stronger bacteria, or to just group bacteria together to eliminate them. Maybe just go super big. Use 2 pieces of gear to rearrange stuff, stun something, take another action because your stun is upgraded, and then you can grab that cool thing, and then you just delete a bunch of bacteria. The beast is struggling on which of the 4 bacteria to play from their hand, especially since some of the bacteria is linked with crystals or gear that the miner would love to acquire. The miner and beast are locked into this duel, where there's always a counterplay option for what the other does. Is the beast about to win through one color bacteria? Well, the miner can just constantly delete that color. Is the beast about to win through immune responses? Well, the miner can just upgrade his eliminate action and now can delete immune responses. Do you think the beast is hiding crystal cards in his hand? Just use the capture drill tool to see if you can grab it from his hand and put it on the tract. Or if you don't have a drill, how about blowing up every single card on the tract so that the beast has to fill it up with their entire hand? There's that crystal you are holding. Or how about the beast constantly scanning which immune responses will hurt the miner the most? He's also going to have access to one more trick to hurt the miner, called mutation cards. And this is where the game is going to layer some mind game potential on top of the asymmetry. Here, the beast puts down a prediction on what bacteria is going to hit the miner next. If he's correct, then the miner must downgrade an action, which is a great success for the cramping beast. But the thing about these is that you discard them after use, and there's only 9 mutation cards. So the beast will want to use the return back from hand bluff card frequently so that he doesn't run out of ways to penalize the miner. This leads to a fun push and pull of progression, as the miner and beast both get stronger, then hurt each other a bit, then get stronger, then hurt each other, but they usually won't hurt each other a ridiculous amount because of their own personal things they want to do, like the miner getting some crystals. Then eventually both sides will have more options in the mid to late game. And it's fairly likely for there to be a tense late game. If one color of bacteria gets ahead early, it's a little less likely to see it in the rest of the deck, so then the other colors multiply. Then, as for the crystal cards which the miner wants, the beast actually wants to put some down to help pay for immune response cards. So then the miner will have some crystals to harvest. But of course, this collecting slows down once the beast realizes that he's one crystal away from winning. This all leads to late games where 2 or 3 bacteria are just on the cusp of bursting with some immune cards stacking, while the miner is desperately rearranging and deleting germs to get that final crystal he needs. More strategy besides just tunneling on 8 crystals comes up with the game's point system, where if the beast can't fill up their hand, the game just ends and you tally points. This is really simple. The miner just gets points for crystals and upgraded actions, and the beast gets points for immune responses and bacteria progression, and then the kicker of subtracting any crystals they may have in their hand. This is streamlined and completely solves the problem of the beast just withholding crystal cards to slow down the game, because then the miner can just repeatedly empty the track to cause the beast to deck out. So both sides are going to keep an eye on the clock that is the bacteria and the limited stomach deck, where you'll find yourself constantly calculating points to see who has the upper hand if the game were to end soon. Speaking of timing, it is impossible for the game to drag because of at least one type of bacteria will move up every turn with no way to set it back. This leads to the game running really true to its written 30 minutes, which is great. As for player count, there are not 1 but 2 solo modes where you can practice against a robot miner, or a hibernating beast. These get the job done, will probably lead to good practice for your 2-player games, but just note that there's not a lot of additional content overall for solo play. We gotta address the 0-player mode, which is a cheeky point of interest because you can't even have 0-player games on Board Game Geek. Board game designers innovating every day it seems. Anyways, yeah, this is admittedly just really silly because you can't have a board game just play itself while you leave the room and go do laundry. At least they found a cute mode in pairing the 2 solo AIs against each other, and then you roleplay as a robot moving around pieces. As advertised, this has literally 0 decision making. To wrap up the pros, the gameplay meets the theme pretty well. Your crystal-hungry miner is just traveling through these waves of bacteria, zapping left and right with all sorts of cool gadgets. And then a stomach is only so big, so once the deck of stomach cards runs out, the game ends. So now we get to the cons, and before we go any further, we want to point out that this is a prototype copy, so I'm not sure how many of these cons will get patched up by the time the Kickstarter printing comes around. We had a struggle of no plastic bags and just these 3 tuck boxes, so here's to hoping that the game has more in-depth storage or at least some plastic bags. Next, the game overall doesn't do a great job of teaching you how to play. Let's start with the rulebook, where it has humor and is pretty, but doesn't actually have that many examples and needs more visual guides overall. One of the many lacking places is the miner's turn page. It should have shown diagrams of the dice being put into slots to take actions. Like, they even have the control panel board all explained in the next page. Why not show the dice being put in that control panel? The actual, full example of game turns is in a separate booklet, which is confusing because at a glance, that booklet is labeled as Solo Survival Guide and Examples of Operations. Is Examples of Operations just another one of the game's jokes? Another place where the confusion trickles down to is the solo playthroughs, and please do not try to play solo without first playing 2-player, because this booklet explains everything, assuming that you've played 2-player first. Anyways, because the solo playthroughs require you to flip over the board, introducing you to new symbols and AI actions, more diagrams would have been greatly appreciated in the solo rulebook. Overall, for a game that is so asymmetric, unique player boards for each side would have really made learning a galactic times easier. There are small card player aids, but since they're double-sided with the solo variants on the back, they lend to being much more annoying to handle than just one single sheet. Speaking of hunting for things in the rulebook, the game really needs a FAQ. Yes, it does have tons of little text bubbles that answer questions as they come up, but these by nature aren't easy to scan if you have questions for the multiple interactions. Like, we had a question on how the drill works for solo playthrough, and after searching through this solo booklet many times, we couldn't find it. And then later, it turns out it was in this 2-player rulebook. Now for this game board, which was a huge source of annoyance during every single playthrough. The boards connect to each other with a very loose connection and tends to stick up in these weird angles that make moving cards around super annoying. When these cards catch in the grooves, it is irritating, and you're doing this all the time. Ideally, the connecting segments should be on the sides of the board so that the cards won't catch on them, but then they kind of shot themselves in the foot with a double-sided design with all the texture. Because of this design, they can't do a folding board, which would be a smooth solution. So the game board just needs to be thicker so that the connections don't stick up, or have a more discrete connection location. That's it for the cons, now it's time for the nitpicks. Now the first one is these mutation cards. As all the mind games it does have potential for, it can actually feel like it lacks nuance. You don't quite know what the miner is gonna roll on their turn, so your intuition is guided mostly by the board state, but then that's gonna change a lot anyways because the miner is gonna use its rolls to move around things. This could be fixed by having the miner roll their dice for their upcoming turn right before the beast plans their mutation. That way, it wouldn't interfere with the rest of the monster's turn. The second nitpick is that even though this game has rampant asymmetry, there's not a big replay value, considering that this is the world of 2021. Sure, the tracked, beast hand, and immune cards will probably look different every game. Or there's a chance that the game starts with a lot of crystals on the board, or a lot of tools, and then the miner wants to upgrade actions a little bit differently. But that's kind of the limit to any weird variants because stomach cards by nature are so similar. To add on to that, there's no special minor abilities to play around with for the dude that always starts in the same place. Some who really like this well-balanced nature with less hectic game openings won't care about this. To experienced players, adapting well to different color combinations is an awesome reward for mastery of the game. But if you're the type who likes to explore new special abilities with every game, there's no add-ons in this game for that. So now it's time for a tentative score. Because we just got sent this prototype, we don't know how much of the cons will be patched up, what Kickstarter stuff will be added, so You've Been Eaten is gonna get a 7 out of 10 from us. It's tentatively good. There is a pronounced asymmetry without one side having a clear thematic advantage, which has trickled down into its balanced gameplay. Yeah, the big bad beast has literally ingested the miner, but the miner wanted to be ingested and is frantically grabbing crystals before he melts. Every roll can do something, and the cards are very similar, so you always have something to chew on despite your roll or draw. Both sides will immediately participate in a system of checking one another while thinking deeply about the ever so important track sequencing. This tie system means that snowballing is unlikely as both sides just frequently rain on each other's parade, and as a result not every turn is flashy. But the multiple timers ticking means that there's always tension even on the slower turns. When we really tie the gameplay together, don't get fooled by this game's colorful appearance. There's actually a lot of thinking on both sides where laughing may not be the thing you're doing. Instead of giggling at the insanity of this dude getting eaten, you're laser focused on action optimization, on tracked ordering, or the bacteria that is gonna come and get ya. So if you want a fairly competitive asymmetrical short 2-player sci-fi crunch, this could be it. If you like sci-fi adventure and blowing stuff up, play as the miner. If you like to be a little more deliberate and plan your turns with your hand of cards, play as the beast. My personal score for So You've Been Eaten is a 5 out of 10. I have an average time with it. First, I like the theme. I like my sci-fi. I do wish that gameplay was a little more silly though. Speaking of gameplay, the decisions really surprise me on how weighty they are, and I always feel that tense nature of late game as the bacteria just move closer and closer to victory. Here's some of my shortcomings with each side. The beast always has a similar hand of bacteria that he is rearranging to place, which is no shortage of decisions, but that sort of constant conveyor belt placing is just alright to me. As for the miner, he is more exciting for me to play, but I do get a little disconnected with his adventure as he doesn't have a piece moving forward, and instead you're facing an endless stream of bacteria for 30 minutes. And despite having all the clocks in this game, I did feel some lulls because the turn structure didn't feel snappy. Because each side does all of its actions, then the other side does theirs, this led to moments of waiting for my opponent to do all of their many actions. Of course, this lull is group dependent, and I felt this more waiting for the beast's turn, but the ever-changing board means that you can't plan that much ahead while waiting. You can respond well, but you just gotta wait for your turn. The last little annoyance is that this game's push and pull nature doesn't feel satisfying to me when each side isn't directly fighting each other. So there's no fighting or health that I like in these type of games, but instead the conflict comes with having each side having their own specific way to downgrade each other. So what's like one side's fighting like this, other side's fighting like this. It totally works, it's just not my jam. The game just ends up floating around in a weird space where I don't really play competitive 2-player 30-minute games. If I want that, well, I'm gonna play Magic or Yu-Gi-Oh! And these are very asymmetric. And my solo playthroughs were just okay with the lack of clear progression that I prefer in solo games like Agricola. Plus, the combos are never flashy enough for me to get excited about efficient action sequencing. As always, thanks to our patrons for making videos like this possible. We got John S, Manuel G, Brian C, Clifford H, Aaron W, Max B, Bora, Jeremy MC, Charlie P, Quinton S, Sam S, Travis R, Alvin Y, Bomb ZK, Ryan Z, Jennifer L, Brett M, Matt G, Peter Z, Spinner71, Ryan J, Brad G, Tiamo period, Mark A, Nathan C, and James M. And we got 2 Mad Lads of cardboard, we got ZL and Jeff L. We got 1 Mad Lady of cardboard, we got Amy. We got our Patreon link in the description below if you want to check that out. And as always, drop a like if you like the video and subscribe. And let me know about what games you want me to review next. And then any 2-player games you want me to check out. Anyways, bye-bye.